Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Bryan O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Hello, listeners, and welcome again to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. I am your host, Bryan O'Rourke, and thanks for joining us. Today, we have a terrific guest, Elisabeth Bohlmann, who serves as Vice President for Client Strategy with December Labs. Elisabeth is a polyglot. She speaks a number of languages. She's joining us from Uruguay today, and she's an artist as well, a musician, a very intriguing lady who has done a lot of work in technology development with a particular emphasis on fitness, the wearable ecosystem, etc. She has been a speaker at CES. And, we had a really nice chat about the challenges of developing technologies, and I think there are going to be some great insights that you might enjoy. Before we get into this, I want to remind the listeners of a few things. Number one, we have a webinar expert series coming up on August 17th, and Alan Leach will be joining us along with Dana Milkey and another great guest to talk about basically data and the challenges of using data today and how to use it in your business. So please check that out. We'll be sending the links, etc., for the event via our newsletter. And if you haven't joined our newsletter, please go to our website, fittechcouncil.org, and subscribe so you can have an opportunity to join us. Another thing I want to bring up, of course, is URSA coming up in the middle of October in Dallas. We have a lot of people joining us there, and I know while still we have some challenges with lockdowns around the world, things are opening up as a result of vaccinations, so we're anticipating quite an attendance there in Dallas, so I would urge you to check that out at ihrsa.org. So anyway, I hope you really enjoy Elisabeth's chat with me. I find it, really practical, for listeners that are very interested in the challenges of actually developing their own technologies, particularly apps and other tech applications, which Elisabeth has a lot of experience in. You'll see, again, her information, et cetera, in the show notes. And if you have any questions, please, bryanko'rourke@gmail.com, or you can check me on most of the social networks. So without further ado, let's bring in Liz. Welcome, listeners. Again, in the intro, we have a real pleasure today to have Elisabeth on the phone with us on the podcast. Liz, as she likes to be called, is joining us from Uruguay, which is a beautiful country. Liz, thank you very much for making time for our listeners today as we talk a little bit about technology. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, Bryan. I'm really excited to be chatting here a little bit with you about fitness and technology.
So for the listeners, I was joking with Liz before in her LinkedIn profile, which will be in the show notes. There's a couple of things that I want to mention before we get into the question and the conversation. First is, because Liz is bilingual, in her LinkedIn profile, there's a term polyglot, which means you can speak multiple languages, which not many people know that. So the little information for you Scrabble players out there. And she's also an artistic person. So I'm looking at her collection of instruments behind her, and I was mentioning that I have a baby grand piano right down the hall with me with 2 acoustic guitars. So we share that in common, Liz.
Yeah. I definitely have to say that I'm in very good company here.
Well, I think we're going to talk a little bit about design and the idea of the artistic, mind, the left and right brain, and in today's world, the benefit of having the balance of those two. So I think it's quite fitting that I would see you with such instruments behind you. They look very nice, by the way. So.
Thank you.
Let's jump right into it. As the listeners know from the intro that I did on you with your experience and, sharing your background, which is quite impressive. you've been out there for a while working with clients on, the big challenges today of, figuring out how to deploy technologies, whether you're a startup, an enterprise business. In your experience, what do you find with your clients are the biggest kind of challenges that you routinely have dealt with when it comes to, you know, seizing the opportunity and overcoming the challenges of applying tech in their businesses? What are your insights on that, Liz?
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, it does depend on what stage of the development process you're in. One thing is, of course, if you're just starting out, and another thing is if you have already validated your idea and you have an ongoing business that includes some kind of technical component. But really, it comes always down to the core question of, are you building the right product and are you building it the right way? I think that's really at the essence of any idea, of any challenge, of any product that you want to build. And while it seems easy, it's actually quite challenging. And if I just think sometimes about all the conversations that I have, day long, and all the different companies and entrepreneurs, you see, you really notice when you have an idea that's different and that stands out. Because on the other hand, I do oftentimes hear kind of the same pitches or the same ideas, recurring on a sometimes even monthly basis. So I think first of all, really validating if what you want to build is really something where you're onto something, and then also understanding how to build it the right way. And this can mean anything from the kind of technology solution, the kind of tech partner, what kind of your short-term and long-term plans are, what your minimum viable product, your MVP should look like. There are many, many different things to figure out really from the start before you even start thinking about spending all of your money on this.
Yeah, and as you point out, it's a function of where you are in the business, but is it also
100%,
a
yeah.
function of some of the mindset of the people in the companies? Because depending on where you are in stage, obviously, but also technology changes all the time, and if you don't have, I'd assume, having gone through this myself, some external points of reference and context with expertise, it's not you can waste a lot of effort on the wrong
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Yep. And I mean, there are, of course, statistics that say that, for example, 90% of all startups fail. And what I personally really like to take on as a challenge is work with companies and try to see how they can be one of those 10% that I don't want to say, that make it, because that, of course, is another level of success, but that kind of can go through those initial stages, and that can get to where they actually validate, if their ideas are really solving a user's problem, because that's where it's all just coming together.
Yeah, and in my own experience, to kind of, I hope, bolster what you're saying, it's interesting because talking with a lot of people every week, which I do as well, uh, there's so much going on, and it you really need, any organization, even enterprise businesses, if you don't have some external reference points or advice or help, I think your chances of being in the 90% versus the 10 really start shifting, right?
Yeah, and it's also about just getting kind of the right mix between having a good idea, knowing your competitive landscape, knowing what level of, innovation you can add to the table. Because I mean, we all know it, emerging technologies are just, through the roof. There are so many different things that you can integrate today in technology, but really understanding where that sweet spot is requires a lot of research and a lot of talking to peers, to folks in your industry, to really, be sure who to speak to within your network. And I just always encourage people to take advantage of also the virtual connectivity that we have access to today, so that before you actually start thinking about building something, you make sure that you know how to, and the whys, and the hows, and the for whom, and all of that.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough because even in the largest companies, Apple being an exception and others that are mega businesses, right? They're really outliers. But for many companies that are smaller startups or even, decent sized enterprise businesses,
Hmm.
you may be talking about 50, 100 million, $200 million, not huge businesses, but they simply don't, it's really almost impossible to have enough in-house expertise to
Hmm.
pull this kind of stuff off. And I still find it interesting that many, you have to augment your business with external experts. If you don't, you're really, really putting yourself at risk when it comes to whatever you're trying to achieve.
Right. And there's also a lot of something that I call democratizing knowledge, or that we call democratizing knowledge. I always feel that the better informed people are that we might be potentially working with at some point along the road, the better really for everyone. And sometimes that information leads to a different solution or a different path. I just had a conversation with some folks last week about, them wanting to build a mobile app, and they said, we really want to build something simple, and then we want to validate it. And I said, well, but why don't you validate it before before building the product? Why don't we just build a design prototype and we conduct some kind of user study, user research? And they were like, wow, you're actually the first person from all the companies that we've talked to that, said that didn't just go into like the easy way of, oh yeah, sure, we can build your mobile app and you can spend a lot of dollars on this. No, but actually take a step back and listening to what their objective was, which was validating their idea.
Yep, Liz, I think you just articulated the point we were discussing very well. And that kind of thing happens over and over again. And I don't care, even if it's outside of tech, if it's finance, if
Yeah.
it's marketing. I mean, if the businesses that are going to be more successful are going to be those that do what you described, and democratizing that information, all it does is help businesses make better choices.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Again, and I mean, the best scenario for me is sometimes, first almost sending someone away because I see that, this might not be the right moment of time, or to have this kind of partnership, and then have them come back sometime in the future where it is, because you know that you didn't just, or you're not just potentially helping them building their product, but you've also helped them throughout these really important business decisions. And it just creates a whole different level of trust.
Yep, trust. Boy, trust. I can go on and on
Mhm.
about that. It's absolutely true. Well, we could discuss that subject for hours.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the next thing because you're an artist, obviously.
I
And
am.
the idea of design, you're a polyglot too, but the idea of design,
Hmm.
um, and you're kind of alluding to this, kind of a segue, right? Where you
Yeah.
look at technology um, and how design drives technology and technology can contribute to design, the interplay of design and tech. Can you articulate about that dynamic for us?
Yeah. I have to say that it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. My background is a little mixed. On the one hand, I have a degree in economics, and then I worked for about a decade in marketing, in digital marketing. And so, from both of these areas, I've been able to really apply a lot of insights to what is today called UX and UI, user experience and user interface and software development. I think first and foremost, really, it helps companies, developers, everyone involved in a software product development cycle put the user at the center of everything that you do. I mean, that's the U and UX and UI. Because if you are not building something, and this, we're talking here about software, but it could also be, outside of software. If you're not building something for a specific user and solve a specific problem, then it probably won't make any sense to proceed. So that's something that I really appreciate about UX, UI, and UI in software. And it's actually quite astonishing how this is still something pretty recent. If you look at Google search or Google Trend results, actually, I think it just started really to boost in 2014 or so, and software has been around for a few decades. So and I think that's really also reflective of what we saw when it came to websites in the 90s. Terrible user experience, terrible user interface, and it's really amazing, yeah, what these kind of philosophies, methodologies, and activities today can do to really improve any kind of tech product that you interact with.
And from that perspective too, now you're seeing, of course, voice is a new level of interface.
Mhm.
You're going to see, AR, VR as a new level of interface, mixed reality. You're seeing tactile. You're seeing, even maybe brain-computer interface eventually. These interfaces. So
Yeah.
when it comes to design, you're not just talking about linear dynamics here. You're talking about multifaceted considerations. Is that making it more complicated? How does that deal with the life cycle of product, or,
Mhm.
how do you approach those considerations?
It certainly changes the timeline and the product lifecycle, as really the developers are not making these kind of decisions as they maybe used to. And I think that's a good thing to have people that specialize in how a user experience or a user interface should look like make those decisions for them. But there is really a high level of interaction if you're doing it right, because also designers, if you are only a designer, or we see that sometimes with clients that come with a design product from a design only firm, if it hasn't been validated with the developers, then you have the other problem that they really thought out of the box. It's very beautiful, but either it's not very feasible to implement, or it just complicates things unnecessarily. So for any really successful product development lifecycle, when it comes to software, we do want developers to speak to the designers during the design process, and for the designers then to accompany the development lifecycle as well, because only then you can really get the right synergy of leveraging these amazing skill sets that both types of teams have.
And that is an art. Talk about artistic,
Yeah.
the balance, right? I mean, because you can't make a product that's going to last forever. Also,
Yeah.
depending on the stage of the development process, you don't want to solve for all problems. You want to get to an MVP so you can actually apply the
Mm-hmm.
product. Yet, it's hard to find businesses that, aren't giant companies, but even they can mess it up, that are very good at balancing that art of the practical and the theoretical,
Yeah.
all these dynamics at hand. That is the art, isn't it?
No, and still also when it comes to the design of software, of apps, again, there's actually a lot of education still to do sometimes, because in a way it's almost more important sometimes than the actual development, because during this stage you can, as I mentioned before, validate, for example, an idea, an app prototype, which is basically a clickable walkthrough of what you're trying to build. You can put that in front of users and give them most of the time a pretty accurate experience of what the final product will be. And small tweaks that can be done maybe in minutes or in hours in design might take days or weeks to change when once the product is already developed. So there is actually quite a huge return of investment in applying really the right design tactics during this initial product discovery and development phase.
Yeah, and for listeners that know this, because a number of our we have a wide audience, many of them be C-level executives that are dealing
Yeah.
with this thing. Everything we're talking about. This isn't necessarily the center of the plate for a lot of organizations. Like they're not
Right.
doing this every day. So it's something that again, you really need to get help on, because it makes a big difference. Because if you're not doing this every day and keeping up with all these dynamics at play, it's very
Mhm.
hard to be good at it.
Yeah, and there are two things also that I think are important to know, especially when this is not like your day-to-day, bread and butter. On the one hand, don't be scared of adding UX UI to your product development cycle. It doesn't have to be super long. It doesn't have to be super complex, super expensive. There are many different ways of validating, for example, sometimes with as little as 5 to 10 users, what you're building. And with that, statistically speaking, you will probably be able to solve for about 80% of the problems. So don't think when we're talking about user study of having to speak to thousands of people and be, half a year spending on this. And the other thing, when you already have a product and you will probably have, some kind of customer support team, that is actually something really, really helpful to integrate in this ongoing UX improvement cycle, because your customer support team will be on the forefront of hearing about any kind of problem. And so if they communicate directly with the designers, then we can work directly on prioritizing the right things to fix, understand what customers are having trouble with, and again, integrate that naturally into the product life cycle. So yeah, lots of exciting things going on there.
And so, with you've spoken at CES, and you have a certain focus
Mhm.
in your career on, the health app dynamic,
Mhm.
and you know what that dynamic is. I mean, we all know the tremendous double-digit growth that has happened, both in applications and the
Yeah.
wearable ecosystem that again continues to evolve. So, and the other thing is there's a lot of, when you're dealing with new technologies, I'm sure you can appreciate this in legacy industries that service customer need, there's usually a lot of skepticism with
Mhm.
evolving competitors that are doing things. And I'm sure the taxi cabs versus Uber, putting aside the sustainability of Uber might be an example. In the fitness arena and the health arena, that's pretty apparent. I've been behind closed doors with many executives, within the last decade, asking significant C-level executives in the fitness and health space, what is your mobile strategy? That was something no one
Mm.
had a decade ago. But the long way around, the point I'm trying to ask you is, we've talked about a bunch of things that are going on. What do you see in the realm of health and fitness apps? First off, are there any unique dynamics there when we're talking in general about development and the challenges and opportunities? What are your insights given your focus on that dynamic?
Mhm. First of all, I have to say that I've been very lucky to yeah, work really from the inception of when, at December Labs we started to work with startups in the space to yeah, work first with startups within the health tech space, then tap more into wearables, and consecutively also to fitness in general. And this is actually a space that, especially during the last year, I mean, we're talking here, 1 year into COVID happening, that has just become so much more relevant, and which has also, for us as a company working with many fitness companies and startups, yeah, has just been very, very interesting. First of all, maybe when it comes to technology and fitness, I think what and this is something that I think you also touched on in one of your earlier episodes. This is not really a hybrid model. Today, these are really intertwined in an ecosystem. And yeah, we see that every day, and that this actually provides for great opportunities for the fitness center to just go beyond what was traditional fitness. And also going back to what you were just saying about established companies needing to evolve, we work, for example, with a company that comes more from the traditional treadmill kind of segment, and yeah, who we're now helping to tap into kind of the Peloton factor and making their equipment smart. And that is actually one of the areas that that is really enjoyable, because they already have an existing user base, they have an existing product, but they are listening to what users want today. And that goes back to what we discussed earlier, putting the user first and listening to what they might need. Another thing, maybe, more speaking about tendencies or things that I see a lot in technology and fitness, uh, at the center of everything, it's data, and that is great. I mean, just anything related to fitness trackers, biometric data reporting. People can just get today so much more educated, not just about what happens to their body, why they exercise, but almost most importantly, what happens after they exercise, what happens at night, what happens when they pursue other kinds of activities. Other things that you see a lot in fitness and technology in general is also making the entire experience remote, making it online, anything from classes to videos, more the entertainment sector. And then there's the third one that is more about having that experience of, for example, going on a run and being able, with GPS to track where you, how many miles you ran, what kind of, and you can, choose your fitness playlists and anything around that. And really all of these different components, being it, music that you listen to digitally, GPS, or wearables, fitness trackers, reporting, video integration, all of these require different types of skill sets, different types of integrations when it comes to software. And really finding the sweet spot of all of this and adding innovation, AI, different machine learning, different types of possibilities that are today out there is really, yeah, what is, I think, one of the most important things that excites me about the fitness and tech industry.
Yep, and it can get complicated, right?
Yeah.
Quite complicated.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, I said that one of the things that I think is most exciting about fitness and tech is, the entire reporting and biometric and data opportunity. But that also provides for many challenges because what do you do with all of that information? I mean, today, a consumer can access prosumer or professional data, but what kind of actionable insights do you take out of that? And that's really where, as a company, as a startup, as a product, you have to think about what can I do differently. It's not just to know, how many hours I slept in what way, but what kind of actionable insights can I take out of that to improve my performance, my day-to-day life. So that's really where you have to think about when you tap into the space.
Yeah, and we talk about user experience, user interface. That's it, because if you can take all the complexity and make it very simple in a way that a user can actually use it and
Yeah.
make a difference instead of all the data it tells you, Brian, you need to sleep another hour on average every night, and this is how you need to do that. And
Yes.
you want to dig into the data around that, here it is, but trust me, we got this.
Yeah. No, we've been lucky to work with an up and rising startup called Rise, and one of their concepts is attacking the sleep debt, and it kind of talks to you in a way of, everyone needs a certain amount of hours of sleep, and it varies person to person. But if you continuously don't meet that number, then you start accumulating a sleep debt. And so they help you analyze that, but then also, work with you towards improving that and what the reasons for that might be. And again, that I think is where really the additional value lies and what you have to offer, because there are already many sleep trackers out there. And even this product integrates with many different wearables or with Apple Health, with Google Fit. So they're not reinventing the wheel in that sense, but they're reinventing the wheel as far as what to do with it and how to use it to improve your life.
Yeah, Bryce has been in a couple presentations of mine from a few years ago, so I'm familiar with that.
Oh,
There's all these unique, opportunities when it
yeah,
comes to figuring out these technology applications in ways that, I mean, just tremendous amount of opportunity where you would think that, sleep trackers would have it covered, but they're not necessarily taking that data and using it in that way.
exactly.
And that's just another opportunity. And that applies to a lot of other things. I know when we talk about complexity, right, there's fitness and then there's health in general. And there's what's
Yep.
happening in health systems and the collection of data, interpretation of that, which is a whole other complex arena, but just tremendous amount of opportunity for those organizations that can figure out a way to deliver greater value and approach it in the right sense. I mean, just tremendous growth in those arenas, right?
Yeah, and also, I mean, this is really like where I think sometimes the magic happens. Another company that we've been working with for many many years that is kind of in the Fitbit realm. It's a prosumer fitness tracker called BioStrap, and they, for example, just a few months ago started working with an astronaut training program because, of course, astronauts need to track their biometrics. And so when you see these kind of synergies happening, it just gets really interesting. But it's not just about these areas, but it's also, and you were just talking about that, fitness is really a lot related and connected to health. And so fitness trackers today, as we have seen, can help you get an idea of early warning signs of COVID, help you during the recovery process. We also work, for example, with a startup, Texas-based, that has a platform for recovery of addiction. And so they also, in their platform, use on the one hand fitness trackers, but then also alcoholimeters to be able to provide some kind of at-home support for recovering patients that goes beyond the just in clinic support. So yeah, I think whenever these kind of synergies happen, it's just the next level of fitness and technology, and where this can continue to grow.
Yeah, a tremendous amount of opportunity in that realm in the industry in general for a lot of innovation and people that are going
Yeah.
to need a lot of help figuring out how to do it the right way, right?
Yeah.
So,
Ex-
Liz, you've been great. I really, for our listeners, given your background as I described in the introduction, what are some of the, what kind of tidbits of insight or pearls of wisdom might you want to share with folks when it comes to them having an idea or and existing, businesses trying to innovate. We touched on some of them, but what are some of your, kind of pearls of wisdom around things that you've, grown to understand over the years?
Mhm. So on the one hand, and thinking, of course, specifically also on the fitness tech world, we know that there are so many different areas today to tap into. It's fitness, nutrition, mental health, meditation. There's really a broad umbrella of different areas that can be relevant for anyone that's interested in improving their personal health. But really, I always ask people that are interested in working with us about what's really the essence of that idea, and sometimes that lies behind a story, a personal story or so. But it's really what are you trying to do which you haven't been able to solve for with everything that's already out there, and again, have you validated that? Have you thought about what really the right solution is? Because many people also because whenever you think about a product, of course, you also have to think about what kind of business proposition might lie behind that. Do you understand how it works to upload an app to the app stores? Do you understand what the business model of that looks like? App stores typically taking 30%, or now with some of the incentives for smaller businesses, 15% of your revenue, of your subscriptions. I think, just really do your research and your due diligence in that before you start, just again, throwing a lot of money at things. And again, always put the user first at the center of everything. And it sounds, it sounds lame sometimes and so easy, but you would be surprised how many people don't put the user in the center of everything. And they're going to be the ones that either, make or break your product.
That's so true. That is so true. Well, Elisabeth, let me tell you something. It's been a great half an hour of chatting. In the show notes, friends, you're going to see the links to Elisabeth's content, to her business, December Labs, and her role as the Vice President of Client Strategy. Liz, thank you for spending time today with your wonderful instruments behind you. It was great. It was great to see you in the flesh and to chat about these very pertinent and relevant points around technology as a strategy and how people can get there with a better outcome. So I really appreciate you making time for our listeners.
No, thank you so much for having me here. And I think just as a closing argument to say, what is really great about this space, merging technology with fitness, with health, is that, ultimately we're all trying to improve people's lives in a way. And I mean, what could be better than working in this kind of space at this kind of time where really, we don't even know yet what kind of opportunities lie ahead. So was really glad to be having this conversation here with you.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much. And listeners, again, check out the show notes to be able to connect with Liz and learn more about what she does and gain some more of her wisdom.
Hello, listeners. This is Bryan O'Rourke, and thanks so much for listening to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. The podcast is made possible by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, a consortium of global brands working together to enhance the adoption of technologies in the fitness space. Our company, Videri Ventures, which is invested in Vertimax, Montezuma, Gold's Gym Houston, Texas, and Fitness 24/7 Thailand, also underwrites the podcast, along with our service companies, Integris Advisors, Moon Mission Media, and others. Please feel free to share this podcast with your colleagues. And if I can be of any assistance to you, don't hesitate to reach out, bryanko'rourke@gmail.com, or find me on any of the major social networks. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.